Welcome back to the Digital Marketing Podcast brought to you by targetinternet.com. My name's Daniel Rolls, and in this episode, we're going to be talking vibe coding. So if you're not familiar, vibe coding is a kind of new approach to software development using AI. But one of the things it's made software development accessible to everyone. So if we just look at the definition, so it says vibe coding is a software development approach where developers use natural language prompts to have an AI generate code, shifting the focus from manual coding to guiding and refining the AI's output. Now, I have to say, I'm really excited about this because I think it's really important. We're not just using AI to do things quicker, but also that we're doing things better. But really importantly, and Kieran's raised this point in previous podcasts, that we're actually doing something new with this, that it opens up lots of new possibilities and opportunities. And I think the ability to create interactive content is new for most people, or at least the ability to do it easily and iteratively is going to be huge. So the idea that, anyone can write an article, but not everyone can do a podcast. Not everyone can go on to do a video. But what about interactive apps? Well, not everyone could do that. The barrier to entry was huge. Well, that barrier to entry has come down, but I don't think that as many people are taking advantage of it as they possibly can. So what I've got is a bit of an introduction, the different kind of levels of it, hopefully make it accessible for everyone. We've compiled a load of guidance in the show notes. So targetinternet.com/podcast as ever. We're also, for members of Target Internet, we are doing a vibe coding masterclass. So if you're not familiar, Target Internet members get these masterclasses half day every month. We've got one coming up on vibe coding as well. So look at that if you're a member. If you're not a member, we've also got one of our 1 hour update sessions. So if you sign up to the newsletter, targetinternet.com/newsletter, you'll get the newsletter, which has got 3 tips, tools, or techniques every time. No ads, no sales, but newsletter subscribers and members get these 1 hour update sessions as well. So to get signed up to the newsletter, if you're not at the very least, if you want the master class, obviously get signed up to Target Internet. But I like to think really there's kind of 3 levels of vibe coding. And it's took me a while to get my head around this. Now, level 1, super excited about, because this is kind of accessible to everyone. And suddenly, ChatGPT 5, and therefore Copilot, because Copilot is now using ChatGPT 5. Claude is very good at this. Gemini is good, and so on as well. But what they're really good at creating is one-page apps. So if you start your prompt with create a one-page app that, they will then go off and use a combination of HTML, hypertext markup language, the stuff that websites are written in, CSS, cascading style sheets, the kind of styling elements of our websites, and then frameworks like React that are used for creating much nicer, smoother user interfaces. And they'll create code that will run on any website without any need for back-end stuff like databases or special libraries to be installed or anything like that as well. So then what you do is it generates the code for you. You can preview that code within ChatGPT or Copilot or anywhere else. But generally speaking, what you're going to then do is copy and paste that code or just download the files, and then you can upload those or embed those into your website. So for a system like Wix or WordPress, this is relatively easy to do. You do need to consider security, as you don't want to make your website kind of vulnerable in any way by adding code to it. And style sheets have a bit of a hierarchy. So sometimes it can cause you some kind of layout issues depending on how things are set up. Basically, it's not complicated to work around these. One tip is that you can use one AI to critique the code of another AI to check it for any security flaws. So I found that to be really good. Claude is great for that. So is ChatGPT, Google Gemini as well. I've added guidance to both of these 2 issues about cascading style sheets and about embedding code into your own website into the show notes as ever. So targetinternet.com/podcast. So that's kind of level 1. It creates the code. You can preview it. You can then copy and paste that or embed that into your website. And there are some security things to think about, but we put some guidance into the show notes for doing that. This, just at this level, allows you to do amazing things. So we have created interactive timelines. We have created interactive maps. We have used tools to help you generate ideas. So there's lots of exciting things you can do with that. Level 2 is interactive, but with a back end, like a login or memory of previous content interactions. But also, at this level, you can actually use AI within what you're creating. So imagine you wanted to embed something into your website that allowed people to do some keyword research or some content planning. Well, you could use AI interactively within your own app embedded into a website. Now, to do that, you need to have a connection to the back end of ChatGPT or something like that. It's relatively easy to set up. You just set up an API account and then you pay for credit. So bear in mind with some of these things, there might be an ongoing cost, because if you've got hundreds or thousands of people using this new thing you embed into your website and it's using ChatGPT in the background, there will be a low level of cost associated with that. Now, it's got a lot cheaper. So it used to be quite an expensive thing to do. It's got an awful lot cheaper. But there are some other tools like Manus that I'm going to talk about that have got that cost kind of baked into it. Now, the brand new version of Manus, and Manus is an amazing AI platform that uses a number of different kind of AI large language models in the background. But not only can it create code, it can deploy it and it can host it. So just to put that in context, it can create some code and it will put it online and host it for you. And it will give you basically a little subdomain of the Manus website that you can link through to. But it can also do things like create backends that have security and databases in them and so on as well, and analytics. Now, currently that's then hosted on a Manus subdomain. They are looking in the future of allowing you to then point your own domain at this, but that's a feature that's coming. So if you think about this, suddenly you can create something that people can log into. It can remember what they've done previously. But really interestingly, it can use AI. So it can do AI kind of interactions, and you can embed that into your website, because the way you then share it is either by linking through to that subdomain, so it's like a little standalone website, or what we've done is embedding it into your own web page using an iframe. So you create a page on your website, you put an iframe into that. WordPress Wix will allow you to do those kind of things. And then you can put the little link to the iframe to your code where it's hosted on Manus. And there are other platforms that do this as well. And it will show up. Now, my worry was that iframes, any content, is like within a window within your web page. I was worried that it'd be a problem from both an accessibility and an SEO point of view. And actually, they're not if you set them up right. So again, I've added links into the show notes just with a bit of a guide in terms of how you set these iframes up so that they are fully accessible, but also so that Google can see the content of the iframe. Because the risk is that Google sees your web page, it sees there's a window in it, but it doesn't see what's through the window. But you can actually add some code to tell Google to look at what's inside the iframe. Now, this works so well, we tested this out. So we created an interactive Google algorithm timeline, and we embedded that into our website using an iframe, and actually it ranks number 1 in Google for the target phrase that we set it up for. So it can work really well from an SEO point of view as well. Now, level 3 is where it gets more complex. And I've got an interview to help you deep dive into this as well. So you can see the art of the possible, even if you're not going to do this yourself. But if you are going to do it yourself, just to learn from somebody that's already gone through, which is quite a painful process, because I interviewed Christo, that I'll introduce in just a moment. And Christo has kind of gone through this learning curve as all of these AI tools were evolving and changing as well. But at this level, you can create and deploy fully interactive websites and apps with full functionality as a standalone thing. So you could create anything. You could create a CRM system. You could create, fully interactive digital strategy creation tool, anything you can think of. Now, these require things like authentication, security, databases, staging servers, and lots of stuff that only normally full stack developers could really deal with. Generally, what this is going to involve is using some external tools. So setting up some hosting space, setting up something to store your code, those kind of things. And then using AI to help you manage, but generally generate your code across these platforms. And I really wanted to speak to someone that had kind of been through this process. And I was very lucky that Christo Snyman, who is a podcast listener. So Christo reached out and said, look, I've been building and launching a business using vibe coding at this more advanced level. And he was very kind and generous enough to kind of share his journey, and amazingly, his process and his tech stack that went with it, because that's what no one else had really shared. So the second part of this podcast, let's go over to an interview I did with Christo. and we can see how he worked on his business tradelead.ai and how that progressed. It's a great interview because it really talks through the pain that he went through and actually what he's learned along the way. And he's very generously shared this list of tools that he's used to help him get set up and how he did that in a cost effective way. So again, targetinternet.com/podcast, you'll get access to that full tech stack. But don't forget, we have a masterclass for members coming up on vibe coding and an update session for newsletter subscribers. So get over, subscribe, targetinternet.com/newsletter, and over to the interview. Okay, let's get straight into it and talk to us about what vibe coding is and what it really meant for you.
Okay, so a funny thing is I only really heard the phrase vibe coding maybe 2 months ago or so, like
And you've
after
been doing it for a long time before that,
yeah,
right?
after spending quite a few months, like more than a year on building certain prototypes. But for me, it's basically coding without the fear of coding. Like I said, I didn't really know the term, but now after the fact, it makes total sense. It's that putting into practice what my thoughts are. I've got an idea and I can very quickly prototype it or at least test something. It might not be a full MVP or anything like that, but I can really quickly go and try something out. It's that experimenting, copy, paste, test, break, fix, and then slowly kind of make it my own. And it's like building Lego when you don't have the instructions. That's kind of how it
Right.
feels to me.
It's a great.
Yeah, so you kind of put the pieces together and not always knowing what these pieces are, and then until something works, and then refine it. I suppose if any experienced programmer would look at my code, they might be appalled by it, but for me, it's less about like syntax mastering and more about that like momentum and intuition and iteration. I think over time, the way that I've been building things have definitely gotten better, like splitting the code up into modules and things like that. Like you should have seen the first bit of my code. It was really bad. It was really messy. Even like me looking back at it, I'm like, geez, I can't believe that I actually did that. But I think that's something that also with learning this whole vibe coding thing, I've also learned a lot more about programming, like how it should be structured, what you actually should do. So it was learning the syntax, but also learning like development practices. Probably not at the level that, experienced programmer would be, or definitely not at that level, but definitely improved.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that because one of the things I've noticed is that lots of people are getting slightly better at prompting. And the way they've got better at prompting just generally is that iteration. You try it, you learn, you test out what's kind of working and what's not. But what differentiates that, because I could go in and I can use ChatGPT now to do like a one-page app that creates something for my website, that's fine. But the difference between that is actually understanding the structured approach to programming, the tech stack that you might be using, deployment, all those kind of things as well. So we'll get into that because I think it's really interesting. So how did you kind of start off in the space? What got you into it?
So I do come from an IT background, but purely infrastructure, like servers, networks, cloud and things like that. Not coding at all. I've done some basic scripting and batch files and stuff just growing up with, DOS from back in the day where it was like a requirement. So I do have an IT background, and it was a real big shortcoming for me not being able to program and not being able to actually put any ideas into practice. And it's been quite a big stumbling block for me because I've had multiple businesses in the past or business ideas and, entrepreneurial tests or experiments that I've done. And I've never been able, the moment like there's a software component that needs to be written or developed, that's kind of where my idea fell short. So obviously, when I started seeing people on the internet doing basic things, I mean, looking at maybe ChatGPT 3.5 and like the beginnings of 4, it was much more basic than it is now. And but when I saw what people were doing and how quickly they were doing it, even though a lot of people were using make.com and these like no code, low code tools, that really piqued my interest because I could suddenly very quickly execute basic things, even just looking at infrastructure, giving me the code to deploy infrastructure on Azure, for example. That was kind of the first things that I saw, like Azure or ChatGPT will just pump out a big script to, deploy a server, configure the network. And I was like, this is really good. There's a business idea right there. I'm
Right.
always the schemer, like how can I make people's lives easier, basically? What problem can I solve? I just totally became hooked because I just suddenly found problems everywhere that I usually would have maybe steered away from because it had this development component. And now, that barrier has been removed. So I just started doing like a whole lot of different things, mostly with like booking agents, trying to solve business problems. What can the AI do to solve a real business problem? Because I've come from a corporate environment, and there's a lot of business problems. There's a lot of repetition or processes that we can make faster. I've seen salespeople really struggling with reports. And then I saw some people doing, speech to SQL queries basically, and had a few tests, and they were actually successful. They weren't enterprise ready or production ready, but my initial tests were really successful. And that's really what hooked me. I was like, okay, no, this can go a long way. And yeah, I started exploring from there.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to me because actually there's never been such an opportunity for entrepreneurs to actually launch something and get it out into the real world, or at least get a minimal viable product up, like you described as well, which is brilliant because it means that we can take those projects further. I mean, the downside is that you can build something today and then tomorrow somebody can come with something out that's even better. So there's that, it increases that competitive environment as well. I mean, tell us about the idea that you've been working on.
My project's called Traderly.ai, and it basically comes from real business problems. I think all my entrepreneurial exploration is all based on speaking to people and they've got an actual problem. I started getting in touch with solar operators, people in the service industry, and their problem was, being on the tools or being in therapy and not being able to answer their or reply to their clients. There was a specific massage therapist. I was actually busy having a massage, and she complained about Instagram messages just coming through the whole time and her not being able to respond to it. And when she does respond to it at the end of the day, these people have already found another therapist. They've already booked something else in. And I was like, this is a real business problem. This is something that I've already, before that, actually started playing around with booking, like calendar bookings. And I had like a prototype of, putting something in a calendar based on a chat. So I told her, well, let me try and do something for you. The initial idea was just to write something bespoke just for her, just to integrate her Instagram with her calendar basically, and then with ChatGPT, just give her that like natural language to the clients. But as I started building it, I started speaking to a few other people also, and I realized the problem is much bigger than just this one person. So why not go all the way down the rabbit hole and build this multi-tenant SaaS platform that can deal with multiple businesses that all have the same problem? And that's basically what Traderly became. It connects to the channels where customers are already engaging with these businesses. So at the moment, it's Instagram, Facebook. I am integrating WhatsApp, but it's not a very big market in Australia, so it's not a high priority. And then obviously voice also, which is also on the roadmap at the moment. And it's an AI assistant. It can answer questions on your business. So, how much is hot stone therapy? What is hot stone therapy? What is Reiki? How much is your quotation to come and do a fence or whatever? And, what is the duration? And then it will answer this and answer questions based on your business and also take bookings. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what it's about. And yeah, it's working. It's live.
It's amazing because when we first spoke, you kind of were talking to me about, oh, this is what I'm working towards. And then by the time we'd actually spoken, it was kind of live. And I know you've been developing it since then as well. What does the kind of tech stack look like for that? Because you talk about a bit multi-tenant and all those kind of things. So what does it mean in practice? And for those people among aren't that technical, what's the kind of levels involved?
Okay, so I started off, and also I knew nothing about front end development. I basically just asked ChatGPT, what is the easiest, fastest way to code a front end? And it said, you can use React, you can use Angular, and gave a couple of other things. And I asked a few questions, and it basically became React is the lowest learning curve with the fastest like implementation time for someone that knows absolutely nothing. So front end is React Invite, which I think is like a proxying type service. Don't even ask me. Just shows you like, yeah, you can build something without really understanding it. Because that was probably my worst, was the front end. I really struggled with that. And then for authentication, I'm using Google Firebase, so I didn't have to write any of this authentication, mechanisms. Google takes care of that for me. The backend is all Azure serverless functions, so Azure App Functions, and that's basically just, it just has a whole bunch of functions interacting with the backend or with the front end or interacting with Meta's API. And then the database is PostgreSQL or pSQL. So I was already familiar with SQL coming from an infrastructure background, so that was quite an easy transition for me. I did a lot of MySQL stuff back in the day, so P-SQL is a bit different, but mostly the same. It's relational database. Interesting enough, I actually started on Cosmos DB because there was a very generous free tier and it worked very quickly, really well. But the moment I started, the application started becoming more complicated. It fell apart because I didn't know how that worked. And so I migrated everything over to P-SQL, and it was a good step for me. And then I'm using Azure Front Door for the website, which is a content delivery network, basically, just to get the website to load really quickly. I'm using Azure Key Vault to store all the client keys and my personal keys. So I've got 2 different key vaults. And then we've got VNet integration on everything. And then, yeah, OpenAI for obviously for the LLM. I'm using multiple versions depending on what query is being sent. So if it's just a quick formatting, like taking something that's been retrieved from the database and formatting it into human readable format, then I've just used like a very cheap model. If there's more reasoning involved or function calling that might be ambiguous based on what's being returned, then I'm using the more advanced models. And then for my website, I'm using WordPress with Divi. Divi was quite easy way to develop WordPress. And yeah, Google Analytics, Meta, and then I've also got a Dynamics 365 CRM. And I'd also just like to say this to anyone listening that is starting their own business. I was enabled for a lot of this because of the Microsoft startups program, where I got $5,000 in credit. And so it enabled me to spin up all these servers and all this infrastructure without spending a dime. Otherwise, you're going to, P-SQL is going to cost you like $19 a month. The function app's going to cost you maybe $25 a month or whatever that price is. And it quickly adds up. So this was a very big enabler for me, is that Microsoft program.
Yeah, and that's still available. So people, what we'll do in the show notes, so targetinternet.com/podcast, we'll put some links through to all of these different parts of the tech stack that you've spoken about. And then we'll put through to the Microsoft program as well, so people can take a look at that as well. So kind of lessons learned along the way, what kind of, obviously there's a lot going on in this process.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the first things, and ironically, something that I've learned or read in probably every single entrepreneur book or entrepreneurial podcast, is don't over-engineer too early, and it's exactly what I did. Yeah, don't spend all that time fixing things that no customers see. Build the smallest thing. Get real world feedback, focus on that problem and just get that problem to customers and get their feedback. So that's probably one of the biggest things. But also ties into that, like, your infrastructure is invisible to customers. You can spend weeks on getting your certificates right and getting your networking right and, getting it all like enterprise grade. But the customers only care about their problem. And then another thing and I've also seen this and heard this in podcasts and entrepreneur books and talks and stuff, is expect to throw things out. Expect that it's not maybe going to the application that you're super involved in and sensitive about it and so close to. It might not be the one that the customers want. So be prepared to pivot. Be prepared to throw big portions of this away if there's no product market fit for that, or if you don't see a product market fit happening. And I think that was also a big thing for me. Like, I had to let go of things that I thought, whoa, this was so great, but no one wants it. So I think, yeah, those are the biggest lessons for me.
So anybody want to start off in this space? What kind of practical takeaways do you think you would give someone that wants to kind of start off?
So I think, again, get really close to the problem. I think that was a very important lesson for me. Make sure the problem exists. Make sure you know exactly what this problem is, because if you have a solution for it, you're going to have clients, and you can test your solution without actually building anything. And I think maybe I should have done that a bit more. I think I enjoyed the whole building part of it. As a techie, it was a fun experience for me. But if you really just want to build a business, understand that problem really quickly. And then when you start building, I think iteration is your friend. Like, just go over the same thing over, and you'll definitely get there. Don't be disheartened if it doesn't work early on. ChatGPT will learn what you're trying to do. Eventually you'll get to a point. And if that doesn't work, I've often just taken the exact spec or the ChatGPT chat, and I've popped it into Claude, or I've popped it into DeepSeek. If you're not too sensitive about the data that's in there and you just want to get an answer. And I've often, like, played the LLMs up against each other almost, and I've found the solution basically by putting this one's answer into that one's prompt, and then eventually, like, they all understand what I'm really trying to do and then get an answer on it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We find that as well, that if you are getting stuck in a loop sometimes, you take it out and kind of start again, try a different LLM and just see where it kind of takes you from that point of view as well.
Yeah.
So so that's the kind of journey you've been on. Where's the project now and what are the kind of next steps?
So yeah, the project's live. I'm already looking at pivoting into other markets, but I'm thinking I probably won't right now. I'm looking at possibly real estate because someone contacted me and they have an actual problem that I can solve with 80% of the product. But at the moment, I'm looking for investment so that I can really launch and scale. But my next step is looking for investment, securing something small for, some seed funding during the first like 18 or 24 months, and then see where it goes from there.
Fantastic. Well, it's a
Mm.
brilliant journey going from an email that you sent over to me saying, well, you managed to do this. Then you kind of explaining out your tech stack for me and then us getting to this point as well. So thank you so much for
Awesome.
coming on the podcast. All of that tech stack and everything else will be on the show notes, targetinternet.com/podcast. Take a look at that. And we would love to hear what you do with this technology and where you take it. And we will keep you up to date with the journey and how the investment goes and how the platform grows. So thank you for being with us.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it, mate.
For more episodes, resources, to leave a review, or to get in contact, go to targetinternet.com/podcast.